So what did you think? Let's rank this film on the Cageometer.
That leads us over to the most important question that we ask on this show. Vince, where does the U.S. adaptation of Astro Boy from 2008, right? Is it 2008? I forget.
I think so.
But it was, I don't know.
Who cares?
Nobody
where does
knows.
it rate on your Cageometer?
Oh, God. Well, I don't want to be too harsh because it's a kid's movie. I remember saying that originally. So I'm going to give it a 5, like kind of middle ground. I think, oh God, this could have been such a better movie. If, I would imagine if they would have stuck closer to the source material and delivered more on a solid message. Like we talked about, it's confusing. Like, are they starting to change their minds and like robots are good or are robots still bad? Because and especially with Astro's character, that when he's fighting all the robots, he just straight up kills them and doesn't seem to care, even though he's now part robot. So I feel like there could have been a lot better message that they delivered on and a theme. I couldn't fucking tell you what either of them are. So yeah, I'll give it a 5. As far as Cage's performance, hardly in the movie, really. I don't think it was terrible. I think of all the animated films that we've watched so far of him, this is probably my least favorite, just because I felt like his performance was pretty flat. And I stand by the fact that I think he has a great voice and great physicality in his voice for animated films. So it was a little disappointing that it didn't really feel like there's a lot of heart. And I don't know if that was his interpretation of that character. Maybe he just felt like Tenma was supposed to be a pretty monotoned character because he's intelligent and he's probably just very devoid of emotion. He thinks of everything logically. So there's not a lot of emotion in the performance because of that. So I'll give Cage a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, it's just so flat the whole way through.
Even at the end, I going back and having to rewatch it to remind myself what the hell happened. I was surprised to see. I guess this is one positive thing that came out of having to redo this. I was kind of shocked and surprised to see that he didn't elevate the emotion in the character at the end of the film. It still felt pretty flat when he comes to accept Astro Boy as his son, and that last scene of them together, it's still pretty. There's like, you would think as he's grabbing him before he goes to fight the spaghetti monster that there would be more concern in his performance and his voice, but it's just the same fucking flat delivery all movie long. So a little disappointed.
This one, I think, out of all of them, I mean, we said he was kind of flat in Ant Bully, but this one, he's really flat.
Yeah.
And it sucks because we've talked about it many times that like he's a leading man who is a character actor at heart. Mm-hmm. And we're, 4 movies into the animated movies, and he's given a character once so far. And that really fucking sucks. Like, why do an animated movie if you're not going to embrace that part of your repertoire, you know?
Yeah, that's how I feel, too. I'm like, is it a direction thing, or is it a Nick Cage thing? Like, it's weird. You can't tell at this point.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if they cast him to be Nick Cage. Just, I get a recognizable voice, but like, not really. I mean, kids don't care.
No.
I don't know.
No,
I mean, I get voice acting is a different skill set from actual acting. So I don't know. Maybe he doesn't like it as much. It's not as fulfilling. It's just reading lines in a booth. A lot of times you're not even in the same. You're not even recording lines with the other actors on the same day. You're just having to go off of what's written on paper, so maybe it's harder for him to do it. But then you get things like G-Force, where he seemed to have a lot of fun and actually played a character with some not nuance, but did a voice. You could feasibly not know that was Nicolas Cage because it felt like he was trying to create a mole rat character or a mole.
Unless you had seen Peggy Sue Got Married, you probably would have never known that was
Nick Cage. So it's like he could play I would prove like he's played a distant father who reconnects with his kid in at least one other movie where he does, he brings some emotion to it. So.
Yeah, I think it's also potentially directing because like I just rewatched Into the Spider-Verse, which we're gonna do very soon. So that one, like, that was also recorded. Everybody was separate in different sessions, but the directing, I guess, was good enough in that case to give a really good performance out of everybody, and they all felt genuinely like they were together. So I don't know. I feel like these types of movies, I think they overlook the connection between the actors, and sometimes it just leads to this kind of performance where it's just flat and dull and boring. And
I think the really good animated movies have directors, or at least voice directors, who know how to properly get performances out of the actors. And can account for things like you're never going to see the other actor potentially in these sessions, but you have to act like you are in the room with them. And movies like Into the Spider-Verse really highlight that. Like that all feels authentic. All of those characters all feel like they're interacting and they feel like real people.
I kind of wonder if maybe like in the case of Into the Spider-Verse, like they recorded the Miles Morales character first, I believe. So I think maybe that's what, they were like playing it back to the actors so that they could react to that voice. Yeah. I don't know. Whatever they did.
That could be one of the strategies they
better.
use. That makes the product a lot better.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's true. Which, I mean, to Nick's, Nick gets a lot of criticism for his performances, right? Because we've said it a million times at this point. He'll swing for the fences a lot. Sometimes he hits a grand slam. Sometimes he just can't seem to get that ball even contacted with the bat. But I do feel like his best performances typically come from directors who know how to point him in the right direction with the performance that they're looking for. I would even say some of his best performances come from directors that wrote the script, and they're able to help him draw things out of that character because they know exactly what they're looking for, and they picked him for a reason. Like, going to Pig, like thinking about Pig, that movie will forever stick in my mind as that's a film where I believe him and the director were 100% in sync because they both were able to relate to the theme of that film, and Nick personally was able to connect to that character having felt similar to him in those ways. And then you get guys like this in this film where they're just probably doing it for a paycheck and they don't really know how to direct people to get proper voice acting out of them. So,
all right, Nigel, where does Astro Boy rate on your Cageometer?
Yeah, I was waffling on it, as I do a lot. I wanted to give it a 5 because, like Vince said, it's sort of just middle of the road, but I think I have to go a little worse than that and give it a 4 just because I felt like it's got 3 or 4 plot lines too many for the 90 minutes that we got it, and its structure suffers because of it. And it's just we've talked about it and we brought it up that there's just so many weird plot holes and loose ends that aren't fully fleshed out, and they're brought up and they're abandoned just so the story could move along. And I think if you just kept it to Toby, Astro Boy, whatever's journey of becoming, realizing he's a robot, he's not the real boy, he's a failure in his father's eyes, and is having to come to grips with how robots are treated in this world. I think you could have tightened it up, but there's just so much going on with it that it just, you lose that message, and you're not quite sure how you're supposed to be feeling about some of this stuff that pops up in it. So yeah, I think it's kind of in the bad movie territory because of that. So that's why I sit on a 4. It's slightly bad, and I think it's kind of deserves the scores that it got. I'm a little harsher on it just because I felt like it was muddled and I didn't really enjoy it. I don't really want to rewatch it. I think it's the worst of the animated movies we've watched aside from Christmas Carol. But there are things I liked about it. It looked fine. I think the art style they picked for it, while clean and maybe devoid of stuff, was accurate probably to the anime and the manga that came out before it. And I think it looked fine. The action was pretty good. I disagree on the rest of the performances. I think they were all really solid except for Nick Cage, which I'll get to in a second. But I did feel like everybody kind of felt like a character, no matter how much screen time they were given. Even the dumb revolutionary robots kind of were the actors playing those were giving it their all to give some kind of character to them. Yeah, so it's just it is what it is. I'll give it a low 4. For Cage's performance, I'm going to be even harsher. I'm going to give him a 3 on this because I felt like he was the one actor who, for whatever reason, just felt like a guy standing in a booth giving lines, like reading lines. He didn't really have any emotion behind it. We've seen it in other animated stuff where it just seems like it just seems like Nicolas Cage reading lines. Like all these other characters, like Korra felt like a character to me. Hammock felt like a character. Even Zog with his 11 words had more character to it. Tenma just felt like Nick Cage standing in a room reading lines on a piece of paper. It really took me out of it. Donald Sutherland, I thought, did a great job too, especially when he becomes the robot. He kind of has that menacing tone. He has this sarcastic tone the whole time, that's sort of tongue in cheek, but he does it really well. And he just has that gravitas, especially when he's opposite Tenma. It's like night and day. You got Donald Sutherland giving a performance that's funny and kind of menacing and charming and engaging, and then you got like Nick Cage just saying lines as Tenma. It's just like, why? Like I said at the outset, you could have probably replaced him with any of those other potential actors who may have done a much better job of with his character. I don't know why. I don't know what the reason for that is.
We've seen this throughout. Like G-Force is the one exception, but like he just kind of is just Cage, which is so weird because he's such a great character actor. But he doesn't give a character in this. And I wonder if like some of that is because he views Tenma as kind of a subdued character, or maybe he was hearkening back to the character's portrayal in the 60s cartoon or something.
Yeah, it could be. He's too much of a fan of it and couldn't bring his own to it. I don't know what that character was like in the original portrayal. It just, to me, it was very distracting. It was like, obviously Nick Cage, but he doesn't do anything cagey really. It's just Nick Cage's voice saying lines. And it's like, you know, when Toby gets vaporized, we don't really get any emotion out of that. We're just sort of told he's sad because he says it, you know, or whatever. And when Astro Boy's heart gets turned off and he's sad that his son dies a second time in front of her, he goes through that realization that he's lost his son again. Again, we don't really get any emotion behind it. He just sort of has this, okay, you're going to have to kill me. And, and, you know, I'll bring it back to life type of thing. It's just, it's weird. I feel like his performance could have been a lot more solid, and it may have rounded the movie out a little bit more if he had. But yeah, I'll be pretty harsh on him for this one and critical of it. Yeah,
I agree with that because it's like he's supposed to be kind of the core of the film. Like it's his story at the end of the day of like,
and he's
he
a
lost
complex
his
character.
son and he brings him back, and
this whole thing is his fault. He's the one that created all the robots and did all this stuff. There's more you should be able to do with that performance than just delivering lines as they're written on paper is what it felt like.
On my Cageometer, I waffled as well on this. I'm still kind of waffling, but I think I'm going to give the film a 5 because of the things that you mentioned of like, I felt like the music was okay. I felt like the visuals were great. I felt like the premise is awesome. I think Astro Boy as a premise is a great premise. Unfortunately, I feel like they tried to jam too much of it into this. But yeah, I feel like a 5, like kind of right in the middle. Not a great movie, not a terrible movie. It's just kind of forgettable in general. Yeah. I thought the performances, like you said, were pretty solid throughout. There's a few characters here and there that just kind of fell flat, but like I thought Eugene Levy was great. I thought Nathan Lane was great. I thought Kristen Bell did a great job. Nick Cage is kind of the one major exception. Bill Nighy he knocks it out of the park in this film. Yeah. Bill Nighy should have been Tenma. His character should have been the emotional weight of the story, and like there's so much complexity that is conveyed through Bill Nighy's performance of his character, of just Tenma, or Elephant, that isn't there with Tenma.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I felt like it was a pretty good film. I always kind of wondered about this one because, I'd always seen it on Nick's list of credits, and I was like, I don't understand why we never heard anything about that film. And now I get it. It's just so middle of the road that there's not really much to glean from it. It's just kind of like, well, it's a mediocre version of this interesting Japanese manga that came out. And cartoon. I feel like I remember watching the cartoon in the 80s, and I think that was the rebooted 80s version of the 60s cartoon. And even then, it was kind of like there had already been things like that out. I feel like Mega Man and stuff like that was out.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like Mega Man and Metroid kind of took this idea and made it better. But anyways, so I'm gonna stick with a 5. I did waffle between a 4 and a 5, but I think I'm gonna go with 5 just for the things that I mentioned. Like, for the most part, it's got all of the pieces to a great film, but it just isn't. Plot holes, lots of things that just aren't resolved. So yeah, middle of the road 5. For Cage, I'm gonna split the difference and give him a 4. I do wonder if a lot of the performance was inspired based off of his own time spent with the character in other forms between the manga and the cartoon. So I wonder if the performance, because I have to assume that Nick Cage was watching the dubbed version of the Japanese cartoon, and maybe he based his whole performance around that dubbed version of the 60s cartoon, which is not a good thing to base your performance around.
No.
But I feel like he did have his moments, but at the same time, he just isn't there. It's just kind of flat. It's just, in general, so far through these animated films, it just doesn't feel like Nick is really into these, or he just is just trying to pay some bills. I don't know. And a lot of times I feel like once we find out the story behind the scenes, it makes more sense. And I'm imparting my own thoughts towards it of I think he inspired it based off of his own experience with what he had seen of Astro Boy before. And tried to emulate probably what he had seen in the cartoon, which is, you got to bring your own thing to it, especially if we're going to make a brand new adaptation. This is very loosely based off of Astro Boy.
It felt like everybody else was bringing their own thing. And the character.
Everybody else gave their own interpretation. Yeah. But Cage was just mediocre, middle of the road, flat. I don't know. I feel kind of sad that he didn't put more into this one. I feel like there are a lot of the issues don't come from him, and I'm kind of upset that this one didn't do better and didn't not that it didn't do better financially, but they didn't do better at telling the story and creating an adaptation worthy of $65 million.
Yeah,
because I think it could be really cool. I mean, honestly, we've told a lot of old stories for a new audience that have come out great. There's 50 Batman movies, and that's been around since the 40s. So, you can tell this story again for a modern audience and do it well. But
obviously, people love Astro Boy because it's been around. And so they're, it's a beloved franchise to some people and can be done justice, but for whatever reason, didn't pan out that way with this adaptation of it.
I do wonder who owns the rights at this point. I wonder if it's reverted back to Japan. But
I saw that there's a modern TV show, cartoon about it. Maybe that's more popular or a better adaptation. I don't know. It definitely feels like something that's better suited to a TV show.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, hopefully we get another stab at this at some point. Hopefully not soon because obviously it failed miserably. $65 million budget, $42 million gross. That is the audience telling you, no thanks. Yeah. We're good.
Right.
And that was like after you include the Japan or the Chinese release, which made most of the money. I don't even think it debuted in the top 5 in the US. So that's bad. That's real bad.